Welcome to Evidence Based, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're discussing strategies to boost your mood and build a better life using behavioral activation with Dr. Nina Josefowitz, co-author of the Behavioral Activation Workbook for Depression. Nina is a clinical psychologist. In addition to her clinical practice, she teaches at the University of Toronto and has offered training in North America, Asia, and Africa. She is author of numerous professional articles on cognitive behavioral therapy and issues related to general clinical practice. Along with David Myran, she co-authored CBT Made Simple. Hi, Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Cassie. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to talk about your book. I read it and I got so much from it. So I'm really excited to talk about behavioral activation. So I thought we could start with talking about what that is and why it can be effective for people who are struggling with depression.
Okay, I'm delighted because I'm clearly a huge fan of behavioral activation. So what it is it's an evidence-based treatment for depression. It's one of the treatments for the depression that psychiatric and psychological associations really throughout the world have approved as an effective treatment for depression. But it can also be very helpful if you're feeling stressed. Life is just a bit overwhelming. You're finding yourself withdrawing and out of sorts. Behavioral activation can be hugely helpful. And it's based on a variety of assumptions. And the first assumption, which I think is really important, it separates out the causes of depression from what's maintaining depression. So, for example, you're someone who had a really tough childhood. Maybe there was even trauma. The reality is you are at risk for depression. Or something awful has happened in your life. You have an illness, you were fired in a really horrible way, a partner has left you. All of those can be triggers to depression. But that doesn't explain why depression maintains. Those are triggers for sadness, right? But it doesn't explain why depression stays around. And what behavioral activation looks at is how our behavior, how our current behavior in our current life maintains our depression. And what's so hopeful about that is it says no matter what your background, no matter how difficult your previous life has been, no matter what awful things have happened to you, you can be sad, you can be upset, but you don't have to be depressed. And I think that's an incredibly hopeful message to give people.
Yeah, it definitely is. And one concept is the negative feedback loop. Can you talk about how that works with depression and why it's so challenging to break? With some examples would be great.
Sure, absolutely. So, behavioral activation is part of cognitive behavior therapy. And what CBT talks about is how we can take a look at our experience. Let's say I'm socially anxious. We can separate our thoughts. I think no one will like me. I think I'll make a fool out of myself. From my physical reaction, my heart's going to pound, going to get a little sweaty. And my feelings, which are anxiety, and my behavior, which is to withdraw, not want to go out, and avoid social interactions. So we start with looking at the four components. The negative feedback loop focuses on behavior, and behavioral activation focuses on behavior in terms of changing depression, with the idea being that if you change your behavior, not necessarily immediately, but you will change mood as well as your thoughts. So that's kind of the background. The negative feedback loop is you're feeling low, right? Friends asked you out, you're too depressed, you don't go, you stay home, you binge watch TV in bed. How do you feel? Worse, right? That makes you think, I really am depressed. I bet no one really would have wanted to see me. My life really is a mess. As you feel worse, it becomes harder and harder to go out and you withdraw more. The other thing that happens is as you withdraw, you're not only less likely to have gone out with friends and felt a little better, had your mood boost a bit, but you weren't around to hear about the next event they were planning. So you're less likely to go. So you get caught in a real feedback loop where your feelings and thoughts are making you sit home, avoid, feel terrible. The more you avoid, the worse you feel. The worse you feel, the more you avoid. And that's the vicious cycle of depression.
Yeah, that's so relatable. I had an experience like what you're describing myself. I never felt like I really battled with depression in my life. I have with anxiety for sure, but I was going through cancer treatment in 2023 and it was the first time I was like I'm depressed, like exactly what you're talking about, and because you do have to isolate yourself from people. I'd sit on the couch all day. I was on a feeding tube, so that made it worse. I'd watch videos of people eating on TikTok, make myself feel worse, cry about it, go to sleep, wake up and do like rinse and repeat for, the 4 months I was in treatment. And none of those activities made me feel any better. It just fed into that depression and those feelings of, the negative thoughts and the looking at people living their lives normally, et cetera, et cetera. So that feedback loop is so real and so hard to get out of.
Very hard to get out of. And especially in a situation where someone has cancer, they can't go out, they have to be isolated. What behavioral activation would want to do is say, okay, we can't change that, right? But let's take a look if there's nothing in your life which might bring you some pleasure. Is there anything that we could do to change this pattern, even if it was small, to see if we could find something that would boost your mood even a little bit? And behavioral activation is used with cancer patients. It can be quite effective.
Yeah, I can see how after reading your book, absolutely how this would have been very helpful for me then. And one part in your book, you start out with having the reader really understand their own symptoms of their depression. Why do you recommend this as the first step?
I think that's important because a lot of people sort of wonder, am I depressed? What's going on? And, when you're depressed and you're feeling down, it's just this great big black ball of negativity. And sitting down and saying, okay, am I really having sleep problems? Am I having trouble concentrating? Am I feeling very sad? Am I feeling guilty? Do I not enjoy anything I used to enjoy? It's a way of saying, yes, I am depressed. And the hope is that as you recognize you're depressed, that will also push you to say, okay, I need to do something. You can try looking at my book, see if there's some ideas there. If that resonates with you, you can try seeing a therapist. There are other good books that are out there, but I think it can be very helpful. And for your readers, some of the main signs of depression are, do you feel sad all the time? Have you withdrawn from activities that you used to enjoy? Do you not enjoy activities that you used to anymore? Are you feeling guilty? Are you tired all of the time? Is it hard to concentrate? If you're listening to our podcast and going, kind of wondering if that's me, I think it's worthwhile thinking about, might I be depressed? Because there really is something you can do.
Yeah. In what ways do the feelings and thoughts that we have when we're depressed negatively impact our behavior?
So, really interesting question. And again, for our listeners who are depressed or who are wondering if you're depressed or just, overwhelmed, stressed, start to think in terms of the CBT four-factor model. So, if you look at thoughts, I'm no good, no one will like me, everything's too hard, no matter what I do, it won't work out. It would make sense that with those kinds of thoughts would lead to feeling down. And when you're feeling down and thinking nothing I do will work out, no one likes me, you don't really want to try very much. You just want to sit home, curl up, and avoid the world. So that's how thoughts sort of fuel feelings and behavior. And feelings also, when you're sad, when you're feeling guilty, when you're tired, helpless, you don't want to do anything. And so you get into the inactivity, feeds negative thoughts and feelings, feeds an activity loop.
Yeah. And so, what ways does behavioral activation address both physical and emotional symptoms of depression?
Well, by targeting behavior, right? See, it's very, if I say to you, if you're sitting in my office and you say, I think no one likes me, I'm feeling very sad, nothing interests me anymore, very hard to change thoughts, very hard to change feelings. Whereas behavior is something you can actually change. If I said to you, Cassie, instead of sitting home all night and binge watching, could you call a friend? Right? Could you read a book you enjoy? Could you even watch a program rather than just scrolling through the internet? You can change, it's hard, but you can change your behavior. And what we find is as we change our behavior, and even if you're depressed and you're not feeling they give you much pleasure right now, activities that used to give you pleasure, that give you a little bit of pleasure that you enjoy, activities that give you a sense of mastery or accomplishment. And these can be everyday activities. I just did all my dishes. I mean, it's not that I like doing dishes, but there's a sense of accomplishment. My kitchen's clean. And activities that give meaning to your life, activities that are consistent with your values. And everyone has a different combination. But when we engage in these activities, our mood increases and all our negative thoughts tend to decrease. Now, a caveat, it doesn't happen right away, right? It's not like you're depressed, you do something fun, and bingo, your depression's gone. It takes a while, but it's important to persevere.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned too, like those activities that maybe don't necessarily bring us joy, but contribute to our sense of well being, like the dishes. Like, one of my favorite things is when I have a to do list, I will add something that I've already just done to cross out so that I already feel like I kicked off the list on a good start. And I think what you're talking about are what you call mood boosting behaviors. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and what are some ways to identify those, the personal mood boosting behaviors that might work for us.
So there are a couple of ways you can do it. One is you can simply say to yourself, what do I like to do? And that can be a really helpful way. And we often know we can ask ourselves before we were depressed, what did we like to do? It can be really helpful. And I have a list in the book of just looking at different lists of mood boosting activities. One of the things you can do, and we call it a daily activity schedule, often when you're depressed, it feels as if it's just one big unremitting black hole. And what a daily activity schedule is really what it says it is. It's a schedule of your day from whenever you get up, 7, 8, 9, until you go to sleep. And it's usually cut into hours and 7 days a week. And you write down what you did and your mood. And what people are often surprised by is if, let's say, 10 is the most depressed you've ever been, you wake up at a 10, you have breakfast, you might be a bit better. Maybe you're a 9 or 8. A friend calls, maybe you go to 7. But then you hang up the phone and there's nothing to do all day and you go back to a 9. And you didn't really notice that your mood was a bit better when the friend called. But when you write it down and you chart your what you did and you chart your moods, people usually find there's some fluctuation, which means you can start to build on that fluctuation and start to see, can I add more of those kinds of activities to my life? Can I grow them? Can I do them more often?
Yeah, I think that's important breaking it down and tracking that because for me, when I was feeling in this black void, reading is something that I love to do. That I read 75, 80 books a year. And during treatment, I found that I could not concentrate on the page at all. And so, like you said, like my sister started calling me every day. And even if it was just for 5 minutes to say, like, I'm thinking of you, I would notice that I would feel a little bit better, even though I couldn't rely on my normal sort of mood boosting behaviors like exercising or reading a book because my focus was totally off. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, that call from my sister really did boost the mood.
Right. See, so what's interesting, Cassie, is if you were to say that to me as a behavioral activation therapist, I would guess you've got friends, right? And if your sister knew that those 5 minutes really boosted your mood, she could organize a group of friends to call you every day. And I bet people would have been delighted to. If knowing that you like to read, maybe audiobooks would work, even if it was only 10 or 15 minutes a day. So you start thinking, what can you do, right? That you're already doing that would boost your mood a bit.
Yeah, I like that. And I'll say my sister still calls me and it's been a year since I was in treatment. So that was one good thing to come out of everything is I get a call from her every night.
How lovely.
What is imaginal rehearsal and how can it help someone as they begin to practice their mood boosting behaviors?
Okay, so it's actually one of my favorite interventions. Now, some people have very vivid images, and some people are not going to know what I'm talking about. But if you're a vivid imager, you can imagine yourself doing things. And I guess the reason I like it, I'm a very vivid imagine. So I could imagine, for example, going to a party. I could imagine going out dancing. I could imagine picking up a book and reading it. And what's so interesting is when we imagine doing something and we actually see it. So, for example, for your listeners, imagine that you see a blue vase, like really see a blue vase. Notice the color, look at the vase. 80% of the same neurons will fire in your brain as if you actually saw the vase. And what that means is if you practice in your imagination, you actually get better at it. And sports people do this all the time. With behavioral activation, it's very hard to get going. Let's say we decided you would try and listen to a podcast, right? It's that, for 10 minutes a day. I would say, can you imagine actually picking up your phone? What podcast would you like to listen to? Or what book would you like to listen to? Can you imagine turning it on, finding audiobooks? Can you imagine sitting back in your bed, or maybe you'd like to go on the couch? What would boost your mood more? And then can you imagine doing it? And as we walk through the activity, we often get ideas of how to make it better. So, for example, maybe you were in bed all day. I would guess your mood would be a teeny bit better if you got out of bed, got dressed, and sat on the couch or a chair. And so it gives you ideas of what are the obstacles, what could you do to make it better, and it makes it more likely that the person will do it.
Yeah, I like that. That's such an interesting statistic, the 80%, that our brains are so fascinating.
They are. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I want to ask about what role do values play in behavioral activation and how can they sort of supercharge our mood boosting behaviors?
Okay, so again, really, really important. So we've talked about the three kinds of mood boosting activities, things we enjoy: going for a walk, listening to music, being with friends, things that give us a sense of accomplishment or mastery. And by the way, that's not just doing amazing things. For example, those of you who are parents, there's a lot you do that gives you a sense of mastery or accomplishment every day. And then there's things that give us meaning. And as human beings, we do a lot because things give us meaning. And it gives us pleasure to do things that give us meaning, even if it isn't fun. And I'll give you an example of that. I just took care of some of my grandchildren. So, morning, I say to my little 3-year-old grandson, put on your snow pants. It's time to go out. He says, no. I say, yes. He says, no. He climbs into the closet and hides from me, right? I cajole him into his snow pants and we go off to daycare. Now, was that fun? Absolutely not, right? Did it give me a sense of accomplishment? Yes. And was it meaningful? Yes, right? Because it's meaningful to me to try at least to take good care of my grandchildren when I'm babysitting. And if you can identify the values behind activities, you're much more motivated to do them and they become more important to you. Let me ask your listeners to try an example, to try an exercise. Think of something you enjoy. So for me, it would be walking, right? Something you enjoy, but you're not like dying to do it, right? So for me, it would be walking. I'd like to walk a little more than I do. And then ask yourself, what's the value behind it? For me, the value behind it is health. Once I identify the value, not only do I enjoy walking, but I'm way more motivated to walk. And so try and think of something you enjoy, like reading, right? You said you enjoy reading. For you, Cassie, is there a value to reading besides just that it's fun?
I really value creativity and I'm a writer myself. And so I enjoy seeing, world building and the craft of writing.
Hmm. So for you, if sort of you've been reading, but you'd kind of, sort of wanted to read a little more than you have been, ask yourself if thinking, when I read, it's also about creativity, understanding the craft of reading. Does that make you want to read more?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my guess is it does. And so, people who are listening, ask yourself, what are my values and how are they related to things I enjoy? And it can be a huge motivation booster.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew McKay, creator of Therapy Assist. We've designed Therapy Assist to be an accessible and efficient platform. By providing a library of thousands of resources and the ability to customize workbooks, we're putting evidence-based tools in your hand, helping to improve client outcomes. Research consistently shows that between-session homework can significantly improve client outcomes and reduce dropout. But finding the right tools to assign can be time-consuming. Therapy Assist makes this process faster and easier. You can search through a library of curated resources, including psychoeducation, worksheets, exercises, meditations, and much more. You can use these resources both during your sessions and as homework assignments for clients, all with the confidence that they are rooted in evidence-based therapies. Therapy Assist's resource library is built on the firm foundation of New Harbinger Publications' 50-plus years of pioneering work in self-help and psychology. So you'll have resources created by world-renowned psychologists and researchers right at your fingertips. Our platform makes it easy for you to find exactly what you need with search filters and curated protocols. These comprehensive tools provide you with the ability to search for a resource by any combination of therapy type, presenting problem, transdiagnostic mechanism, intervention, or resource type. Therapy Assist helps you support more clients between sessions in less time. I know therapists often spend hours searching through files, books, or online to find the resources they need. Therapy Assist takes care of this for you, saving you valuable time you can use to focus on what matters most, helping your clients heal and thrive. With Therapy Assist, you can also review completed resources ahead of time, which means you'll be fully prepared for each session, ready to make the most of your time with your client. We understand the importance of having access to the most effective client resources in your work, and we're committed to continuously updating our library to keep pace with the latest research and cutting-edge tools in the field. Your clients' privacy and security are top priorities for us. Therapy Assist is fully HIPAA compliant, so you can trust that the data entered is kept safe and confidential. To start your free trial and find out how Therapy Assist can transform your practice, go to therapyassist.com. We're here to support you every step of the way.
I want to go into why, or how rather, depression impacts that, and how does this sort of go into that negative cycle that we've been talking about?
Sure, because I think it's really important. When you're depressed, one of the symptoms of depression is everything's too hard. And so we let things go. You don't do the dishes, you don't clean your desk, you procrastinate over tasks at work, you just don't take care of your life. But you're doing that. And so you feel really bad about doing it. So often people get very self-critical. I'm a bad mother, I'm a bad worker, I'm a bad person because my life starts falling apart a bit because I'm not attending to everyday activities. So that's one way that, withdrawing feeds into the negative cycle of depression. There's also the reality that when you do something well, you feel good. Like I don't know if any of you are artists or musicians, but if you sit down at the piano or you play something or do any kind of musical or artistic or creative endeavor and it goes well, you feel good. If you do anything, or if you're a sports person, and you finish a workout and you sort of lifted, however much you lift, or you ran, or you walk, there's a sense of, I feel good about it. As you withdraw, you also withdraw from activities which normally would boost your mood and make you feel good about yourself. You did a project well, you did a creative activity well, and that feeds right into the vicious cycle of depression.
Yeah, and I feel that relates to me in a way from my experience, except for I wasn't able to do things for myself. Like it was sort of taken away from me, but what you're talking about is exactly things that would weigh on me. Like I couldn't walk myself to the bathroom because, my legs were weak and I was attached to my feeding tube, and like sort of those basic daily tasks of like dressing myself or anything, feeding myself, they were taken away. And so what you're talking about, like I feel like that really is relatable to me because you need to feel that accomplishment and that sense of being a person, I guess.
No, it's really, I mean, what you're describing is just so hard. And it's very, very hard, as a young person to have cancer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and when your husband becomes your caretaker and you're used to sort of, running the household, and it goes to the opposite of that. So, yeah, so definitely relate to that mastery and accomplishment.
The other thing you're saying, Cassie, which is so important, is it's really important to be compassionate towards ourselves as opposed to self judging. And if you understand depression as not what's wrong with me, that I'm depressed and I have cancer and I shouldn't be feeling that way. And I don't know how you were feeling, but a lot of young people or old people I know have had cancer and gotten depressed sort of feel, I shouldn't feel this way. If instead you say, of course, what's happening to me is I can't do anything I usually enjoy. I can't do any of the things that give me mastery, a sense of mastery or accomplishment. These kinds of feelings are very normal. It doesn't make it go away, but it can take the edge off of it and at least stop some of that very negative self talk that people can get caught into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. And one other sort of symptom or something that happens when we're depressed is we avoid. Can we talk about avoidance triggers? What are some ways that we can understand our own, and what are some common avoidance patterns that you see in someone with depression?
Sure. So, first of all, avoidance triggers and the common patterns, it's not just for depression, right? It's what human beings tend to do. So as people, we tend to avoid situations that we find stressful. We tend to want to avoid situations that we think will be hard. The kinds of avoidance triggers, it's different for everyone. And there's situations, very simply, what they say we want to avoid, we don't like. We think they're going to be hard. We think they're going to go badly. We think we're not going to like the outcome. We think we won't enjoy doing them. Think they'll be stressful. And, frankly, Cassie, we all know what we're avoiding.
As we're talking about those avoidance triggers, once we've identified it, even though we probably knew it all along, what can we do about it?
Well, let me get there, but I want to talk a bit about some of the ways we do avoid, right? Because sometimes we just avoid, we don't do them. And I think it's really helpful to recognize our own avoidance triggers because that's like a little red flag that says, stop and see how you can address this issue. So the first is procrastination. You just never get around to it. Sleeping or resting can be avoidance. I'm too tired. I need energy to be able to do whatever this task is. I'm going to rest, but then you don't get back to it. Distracting activities, that's actually what I do. If I have a big piece of work I have to do and I sort of want to avoid it, it's really urgent that I do my laundry or clean the kitchen. So it's often activities that are, good to do, but you avoid. And actually, worrying or complaining can be a form of avoidance. You complain a lot, but you never really address the problem. Or you worry, but you take no steps to address it. Forgetting can be a form of avoidance. I need to call my mother, father, partner, friend to talk about a really difficult subject. I don't remember until it's 11 at night, right? And it's too late to call them. So, sort of forgetting can be one, and then self numbing, alcohol, drugs, dope, food, TV, internet binging as a way of just numbing out. So, you asked about once you see your patterns, what can you do? Yeah, the first thing I think to do is really recognize what you are avoiding and be very honest with yourself. How important is it to do? Because sometimes we avoid things, but when we take a hard look at it, it's okay. I'm messy, my desk's a mess, but it's not a catastrophe. I mean, I can live with how messy it is. But to really be very honest with yourself, what are the consequences? And not to pretend that it's okay what you're doing. Be compassionate. If you're avoiding, it's because this is hard for you. So be kind and compassionate to yourself. And then see if you can problem solve. And one of the things that I found very helpful in my book, I go through an actual problem solving steps. And that can be very helpful in terms of breaking down the issue you're avoiding into more manageable chunks.
For me, I always tend to feel better once whatever it is I'm avoiding is done. It's just like the prolonging of it. Like I'll postpone it and then I'll just feel anxious about it until I get it done. So I tell myself, let's just do it. Like we're gonna attack this now so we're not anxious all the way in between. So I want to ask about the role of mindfulness and how mindfulness can help us and what are some strategies you recommend?
Mindfulness is paying attention purposefully to the present moment with curiosity and accepting whatever comes up. And so you can be mindful as you're taking a bath. You can be mindful as you're exercising. You can actually be mindful as you're very sad about something or very angry. So it's not, a lot of people think, oh, it's about sitting and focusing on your breath. No, it's about being in the present moment. So, one way that you can be mindful, you can bring mindfulness into behavioral activation, is let's say one of the activities you were going to do was take a walk. If you take a walk, no matter how much you love walking, if you walk thinking, I'm depressed, I wish my life was different, I can't believe how horrible my boss is, I bet my partner will leave me, it will not be a mood boost. If you walk mindful of the air, mindful of your steps on the ground, mindful of the flowers you're passing, it was more likely to be a mood boost. And it's important that as you engage in activities, you try as much as possible to be present. And actually, one of the cutting edge thinking around mindfulness is to really use all of your senses to be present in an activity. So, again, listeners, right now, take a breath. Notice if you're sitting, what does it feel like to have your legs and bum on the chair? Look around. What do you see? What's in your room? What does it feel like in your body? Any smells? Use your senses to just be present for a moment. So, what often happens with depression is all the negative thoughts we've been talking about, and then you spiral into more. So, mindfulness can help you stop and sit back and observe the negative thoughts. And one of the things we talk about in the book, and this was actually developed by my co author, Steve Swallow, is he calls it hump in the three ends. And what it is when you're having negative thoughts or feelings. So you're starting to think, what's the use? I'm always going to be depressed. No one likes me anyhow. Or you're home alone in bed, feeling really, really depressed. To ask yourself, you start with hump. And what's the truth about negative thoughts and negative feelings? The H is they're harmless. Sitting here and thinking, I'm an idiot, no one finds what I do interesting, I'm really stupid, it's unpleasant, but it's not going to really hurt me. They're harmless. That's the H. They're also useless. They don't get me anywhere, right? All they do is get me depressed. They're meaningless. They're not necessarily true. Often, when you're depressed, you think nobody loves me, and you have a wonderful partner. You have friends. It's very common that people feel unloved, and it's not true. There are lots of people in their life who care for them. So they're harmless, useless, meaningless, not necessarily true, and passing. If we pay no attention to our thoughts and feelings, they pass and they go. So that's the hump part. The question is then, what do you do? So the three N's, are you notice them? Okay, I'm thinking I'm stupid, right? You name them. That's my negative thoughts that I have all the time. And then you do nothing. I don't need to react to them. You can think of negative thoughts and feelings as a conveyor belt. You know, when you get your luggage on a conveyor belt when you arrive somewhere, they just can pass along, or leaves going down a stream. You don't have to stop them. You don't have to pay attention to them.
I like that. And also hump and the three N's. I'll always remember it because it sort of sounds like a band name, like it makes it easy to remember. One concept I really love is the idea of a depression resistant life. Can you talk about what that looks like?
Sure. So, what you're really talking about is consciously creating a good life for yourself. And I think that's so important. And whether your listeners are depressed or whether they're not depressed, it's just really important to think, what kind of life do I want for myself? We've only got one. So we might as well make it as good as possible. And we have some really interesting studies which highlight what a good life is. First of all, social relationships. And what's really interesting, it's not just good intimate relationships. One of my favorite studies is they took a look at people who went into like the equivalent of a Starbucks, a cafe. And they walked in, they smiled at the barista, they said good morning, who then says good morning back and smiles at you and leaves, versus people who just walked in, didn't say a word, didn't smile, got their coffee and left. The people who smiled and said hello and got a smile back had a mood boost. Any kind of positive social interaction boosts our mood. And, we can have friends who we see casually. It can be work colleagues. It can be people who we see during the day, in stores. Really important to try and have a variety of positive social relationships. So, getting back, Cassie, to when you were in hospital, was there a way with hindsight you could have expanded the social relationships you had in some way? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the nurses and doctors, like they're wonderful for helping people who are in the situation I was in. And so I mean, like I think back to journaling and I would try to do sort of gratitude practice and I almost always was commenting on my nursing stuff.
Yeah, really important. And you mentioned gratitude. That's another piece. Really important to do a gratitude practice. To consciously look at what's going well in my life, what can I be happy with? The other piece, we've got social relationships, physical activities, and then facing our problems and taking care of our physical selves. Too often we sort of get into working too much. Some of us tend to be caretakers. We take care of other people and we turn around and we're not feeding ourselves well. We're not exercising. We're not getting sleep. It's the absolute bedrock for feeling good.
Yeah. And you make it sound so simple. Obviously, when we're talking about, living life free of depression, that's our ideal. But one thing I liked and what I want to talk about further as we wrap up our conversation is you end the book with talking about cultivating happiness and well-being. Where obviously we're not depressed, but what are some ways that we can cultivate happiness and well-being and take it a step further?
Okay, so well, we get back, first of all, there's a whole area of positive psychology. And I think to really focus on gratitude, which we started talking about a little bit, to really give yourself permission to do things you enjoy. To honestly, and again, listeners, sit back and think, what do I enjoy doing? And is there any way I can bring a little bit of it into my life? And I'm not talking about planning for the Great Caribbean Cruise. I mean, small little daily things. Are there things that bring you joy that you would like to engage in? But I think gratitude is hugely, hugely important. And really, there's a notion of savoring. A friend calls you, of savoring the conversation.
I love that. I wrote a little blog this month about my goal to be romanticizing my life, and that really goes along with what you're talking about, savoring it, like romanticizing the moment that I'm pouring my coffee and taking the first sip, or when I'm on a walk, like the way that flower smells. Like I really like the idea of it. Sounds just like what you're talking about, like savoring that moment.
And that gets back to what we talked about with mindfulness, of really noticing the flowers, of not just rushing through one's life, but, noticing what's around us and appreciating it. Even if things are hard, there are usually some small things that are going well at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Nina, that feels like a really good spot for us to wrap up, unless you have any final thoughts for the listeners.
I did want to say that depression can be associated with suicidal thoughts and feelings. And if any of your listeners are feeling suicidal, it's very important to talk to someone. Reach out to friends, reach out to family. If there's no one in your immediate life you can talk to, almost every city has a helpline. Just Google feeling suicidal and something will pop up that can be very helpful. And it's very important if you're feeling suicidal to reach out for help. You can be helped. The other thing I wanted to say is depression is hard and it's painful and it takes a huge amount of courage to face your depression and to start to climb out of it, but it can be done. It can be done with help. And many of you, I think, may find my book helpful. You may find a therapist helpful. There are lots of other resources, but it's just so important if you're feeling depressed not to kind of assume there's nothing that can be done. And be kind to yourself. Depression is hard. And people who aren't depressed often say, just get going, just blah, blah, blah. And it's hard. It is very hard. Small steps, break things down, don't do too much. Any kind of activity is better than none.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, for this work. It's so important. And, like I said, I wish I had come across or read your book when I was going through treatment, but I'm really glad I got it after. So thank you so much for your help and for your conversation today.
Oh, and thank you. This has just been lovely.
Increase motivation, improve your mood, and build a better life one step at a time. Do you often feel sad, numb, or hopeless? Are you overwhelmed by seemingly small things or feel mentally or physically exhausted all the time? Do you find yourself easily agitated or have difficulty concentrating? Have you lost interest in activities you normally enjoy? If so, you may be suffering from depression. It's important to know that you aren't alone and there is hope for recovery. If you feel stuck in a negative cycle of low mood, lack of motivation, and feelings of despair, this workbook can help you find your way out. Grounded in evidence-based behavioral activation, a powerfully effective treatment for depression, this workbook offers an array of actionable strategies to increase motivation, connect with what matters, manage difficult thoughts and feelings, and start engaging in life again. You'll also find skills grounded in cognitive behavioral therapy, the gold standard for treating mental health issues such as depression, to help you develop a mood-boosting activity plan and stick with it. Finally, you'll find tips and tools drawn from mindfulness, self-compassion, and gratitude to boost feelings of positivity and hope. Often, the hardest step toward better mental health is the first one, but you don't have to take that step alone. With this workbook, you'll learn how to overcome the inertia of your depression so you can once again engage in the activities that you enjoy and give you a sense of meaning and purpose in life. Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee-owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. The best continuing education training does more than just fulfill requirements. It opens your mind to new possibilities, increases your confidence, and gives you powerful tools to transform your clients' lives. Praxis Continuing Education and Training partners with world-class experts to create cutting-edge, evidence-based courses for mental and behavioral health professionals. Learn how to heal trauma with Robin Walzer, explore values with Kelly Wilson, and master the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy with Matt Boone through an on-demand course. Or join experts and like-minded professionals live to take your practice to a new level. Find your next training opportunity at praxiscet.com. That's praxiscet.com. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.